Good morning. Just want to give a 5-minute warning. 5-minute warning before we blast off into June's coalition. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Go ahead and start grabbing an open seat, and we'll get going. Good morning. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Please find your seat. I love just how we just like talking to each other. I love it. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. Thank you, thank you. So, my name is Robert. I'm one of the leadership members here at the Spokane Homeless Coalition. And it is just so crazy that it's June already. Can you believe? I feel like I was just sending out text messages that it's gonna be May, and now it's already June. This is nuts. Anyway, so thank you so much for being here. We at the Coalition, our mission is definitely to provide education, support advocacy endeavors, and sharing resources and networking, something that you guys were already doing naturally this morning. I love to see that. That is so much. So again, my name is Robert, and my other role is I work for Providence Community Clinic on the corner of 2nd and Brown. I'm the behavioral and mental health support in the clinic as well as a clinic manager. But one thing I love to do, and if you've been here, you probably know my reflections I give at the start of each meeting. And if you're new, thank you so much. I definitely hope you come back again, or hopefully you don't get offended or anything like that. But Providence's mission is to be expressions of God's healing love, witnessed through the ministry of Jesus, steadfast in serving all, especially those who are poor and vulnerable. And I like associating mission, kind of reflection and association with Providence. So vulnerability, right? We all encounter moments of vulnerability. Some are more perpetuating than others, meaning ongoing. But this guy who's mentioned in Providence Mission, there's this moment that's captured the night before something significant's about to happen, and which just slingshots the ministry even more so. But at this night, this man who's mentioned in Providence Mission gets down on his knees, and he starts washing these 12 guys' feet. A moment of vulnerability, right? This in-depth moment. And the association with vulnerability is that there's two sides to it. One, that you can show vulnerability, but the other is to accept vulnerability, which is so hard to do sometimes because it can be very uncomfortable at times. So he's down on his knees washing his feet, and one of his students says, whoa, you can't be doing this. You're a deity. We think of you as this walking deity that's going through. You can't be washing my feet. I should be washing your feet. But he says, unless you accept this, then you will have no, if you don't accept this, you will have no part of me. That validates this moment of vulnerability being two sides of the same coin. One, you have to show vulnerability, but also you have to be willing to receive it. So what does that look like? Well, part of it is just the power of presence. Just being there with someone, being yoked, going through circumstances with someone, walking side by side with whatever they're going through. And I love that we're able to come and meet once a month and share those moments of accomplishment and share those moments of where we get to be vulnerable with the people we work with. So I just want to say thank you so much. Again, thank you for listening to my reflections. I know they can get a little out there, and you know, if you're not persuaded as I am in some of the context, maybe a little off-putting for you. So I apologize for that. So we're going to go ahead and get going into June's meeting. So we have a few quick updates before we dive into our presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and have Mr. Eric Finch come up. Eric is with the CHHS department, and he is going to give us a brief update about what's going on. Thank you, Eric. And you can have a seat.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, all. So I think just you know, as I think updates, you know, a lot of things are still kind of in flight. We're, I think, evaluating the different proposals for both service providing as well as the shelter expansion. We hope to get that done and to some you know, level of be able packaging for I think more distribution by the end of this week. So that'll be good to see. We continue to kind of look at the overall, you know, both kind of shelter and service providing network in terms of what additional steps we need to do. There's that community-based planning process that's ongoing that several of you I know are involved in. That is good to see, because that's really meant to be, okay, we know what we have now and potentially what some of the challenges are, but where do we see the system needing to go and grow to? And you know, I think that first kind of 6, I think we're in week 5 of that now, you know, of the kind of the first 8-week push, and then that's supposed to really evolve into, and we're working with the COC on evolving into the update of the overall kind of 5-year plan. So that'll be, I think, good work to kind of continue to move forward. On the staffing piece, I know we have, you know, added a program manager that will start in June, so that'll be a good additional resource that's coming on board, as well as I think the other big piece that's I think happening this next week is we were able to arrange all the kind of the gap funding we needed to kind of get all the current service providers and shelter systems out there funded through the end of this year, and then it will go into a kind of an annual kind of cycle process from there for RFPs. So a lot of those current system providers and shelters were funded with COVID dollars that expired in June. It was about $3 million worth, and so it was a little bit of a challenge to try to figure out how to kind of gap fund those, but we were able to successfully do that without any reductions for the rest of this year. So I think those are kind of the major moving parts, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Eric. We're going to keep this brief. We have a packed agenda, so no questions allowed. Thank you, Eric. Dale, you want to come up? Oh, yes. We'll go ahead and have Betsy and then Dale. As far as a COC update, we have Councilmember Wilkerson with us.
Reason is Council Wilkerson needs to leave fairly quickly. Something just came up and she needs to go quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Good morning.
Welcome to the coalition. I know at least since I have been here, I haven't had the privilege of meeting you yet, but have you ever been to coalition before?
I have not, and I'm honored to be here, and I'm excited to see really the depth and breadth of providers in the room. Many of you might know I work in the mental health field, so I have my own little silo. I provide assisted living facility to men, and that's a family business we've been running since 1976 in the historical Browns Addition neighborhood, I might add.
So are you mental health? You said you're in mental health, or?
I am not a licensed mental health provider. I provide residential care.
Oh, okay. And what is your role within the, like, how? Not all of us are savvy to maybe the jargon associated with city and all that. So what's kind of your role within city council, and what does that look like related to homelessness?
Well, really, I think my role is agitator, and I do it happily in the city council world. So I represent District 2, everything south of the river, and currently I'm finance chair. So when Mr. Finch is talking money, everything money pretty much goes under my purview as the chair of that department. So money, money, money. But also currently in my role right now, I am on the ARPA team, the American Rescue Fund monies. And I'm leaving because today we'll be doing another presentation of where those monies will be going out in the community. So my biggest role for me personally is I am an advocate for the unhoused and homeless. I've seen it, I've lived it personally at a point in my life where I'm a single mom and I'm living in my brother's basement on his concrete floor because I had lost my home. So I understand it on a level that I think many people who are elected do not. And I know that by the grace of God, that could be me. I have mental health in my family. So to me, it's personal. And so therefore, I am committed to doing everything I can to fund it. And also, my big thing, and I've told my other electeds, I am really on a path to get sustainable funding for providers, homeless, and unhoused. And I threw out the word tax, and it was about an apoplectic shock in the room. But I understand that organizations like what's in this room cannot live and die by grant funding. You don't have the ability for sustainability because you're always worrying about the next dollar, and you cannot grow the program and meet the needs. Now, we don't all agree on council. Shocking, I know that might be to some of you all in here, but I believe we have providers who could expand the services that they do now to meet the needs, and there is not a one-size-fits-all. So, sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No,
Go for it.
and thank you so much for sharing a part of your being vulnerable with us.
Yeah.
And so, going back to an earlier comment, you mentioned ARPA funds. What does that mean? What is ARPA? What are all these funds that people keep talking about? Is there a process and how it's going to be dispersed into organizations, or what does that look like as far as?
So those are the American Rescue Funds, and they are different from COVID dollars. But those COVID dollars, there was a whole different process, and we could deploy that money immediately. With the American Rescue Funds, it has to most of go through an RFP process. And so we had to actually stand up how we were going to do that. We need to get community input on where the money needs to go, and then we have to actually write the RFP, put the RFP out there, and then people have to apply for it. So it has been a tedious process and frustrating, I know, for community members. Like, show me the money, because I asked that myself, show me the money. But we are going down that road, and you won't believe it, but we are ahead of most municipalities in getting their ARPA dollars out the door. So our first big chunk is around housing. That's going out. We just had an informational meeting about cultural grants for small nonprofits. The next one that's coming out will be grants for small nonprofits and small businesses, sustainable, because we recognize, or at least I did, that there are a lot of small nonprofits that had stepped into the gap and was doing the work front line, and now they need some help to continue to do that work.
Thank you. And coming up on Monday are some important topics on the agenda to review regarding homelessness. Right now, there's a lot of momentum around single adults. Homelessness can be such a broad topic, and single adults primarily sometimes get overlooked. And so right now, we're at a point. Can you kind of talk about what's kind of the feel in the office, or regarding like all the sheltering that's going on, and some are pro large shelter or centers, some are for smaller. There's just kind of an eclectic ideas of what these centers should look like. What's kind of the temperature in the office?
Well, the temperature's hot. So let's just start with that. Temperature's real hot. Personally, I am for small sites. I know that when people are in a community, they thrive better. But on Monday, coming before council, will be the presentation for the lease at the Trent Shelter location, and also I believe will be presented providers who have responded to the RFP. That's a lot of money. Again, that's a sustainability question. The city has asked that businesses partner with us to make that happen, because we cannot do it by ourselves. Now, this is the world according to Betsy. Businesses think that they are already paying for homelessness. My pushback is you are paying for criminalization because people may be vandalizing your properties, but you are not paying for homelessness. So various opinions on what people think about that, but we know that we cannot just lump everybody in the same bucket. I know there are mental health facilities that are 60, 100 that coexist in neighborhoods all throughout Spokane and the county. You may know some of them. So I know a neighborhood can be welcoming. Again, this is Betsy, my experience and observation. The city has not always kept its promise of what it was going to do if a neighborhood would welcome a shelter in. So that's on us as the city, that we need to step up. If we say it, we do it, and if we do it, we fund it. So there's just work to do. 7 different people, though. My standing joke is, I work in mental health. I know crazy when I see it, and I can work with anybody.
Yes. And going back to, you mentioned businesses. Do you feel like there's been kind of a different shift as far as how their engagement and how they perceive what's going on in the homeless community? I know Hello for Good has been, established and trying to soak in as much as they can, as far as what they expose themselves to. But do you feel like there's a shift with that, with the business side of things?
I think there is a shift. First of all, Hello for Good, because they're the ones out there, have really tried to educate themselves and educate the community around homeless and unhoused issues. My frustration is they have brought people into our community to talk to us about that, but the people that came in didn't tell us anything we didn't already know. That was my personal issue, sorry about that, but they educate themselves, and sometimes it depends on the messenger as how things are received. But they understand if they don't partner with the city, and I'm speaking specifically the downtown core, that it will affect their businesses. So you're gonna pay now, you're gonna pay later, but you're gonna pay. I want them to step up because they have the resources to invest in solutions. Neighborhoods don't have that. So as homeless and unhoused people go into neighborhoods, neighborhoods can't rally together and come up with thousands of dollars. That's an unrealistic expectation. So we have to really balance the needs of business and the needs of our citizens and the needs of people who are homeless and unhoused and who are mentally ill. There is no silver bullet. We didn't get here overnight. I just want to make sure that we stay on the track, that we are moving forward and being inclusive, and I do not want the homeless criminalized.
And last question, because I know you gotta get out of here. But
I got a fire.
You
I
got
got a fire.
Yeah,
downtown.
you got a fire.
Got a fire.
Yeah. So last question is related to common ground. Mm-hmm. What's your perception on what that common ground looks like between the administration, between city council, between us frontline kind of workforce members and the business community? So I mean, there's like 4 heavy elements, and what do you think that common ground looks like or should look like?
It seems so simple, but somehow it has been so difficult for us to actually sit around the table and talk about it and not be defensive. So business does have their perspective. We have to listen to them as well as they have to listen to us. My concern is we don't have all the right people at the table, because I hear these pocket conversations going on, and it has to be inclusive. So really, communication is what's been lacking. Communication, misinformation, partial information, sound bites is what's been driving the narrative in our community, and many of that has been divisive. I want to hear, Betsy, I hear you about the homeless. Would you listen to my part as a business person? And as an elected, that's what I have to do. So nobody likes me. So, I'm kind of like over it. I can't make anybody happy right now. So the target's on my back as I walk out the door. But really, if we just listen to each other and not be so defensive, and it's like talking to my grandkids. So you just can't be mad and walk away from the table. And that's what I have seen. I have seen people just get mad, get up and walk away. And what does that solve? Absolutely nothing. So we got to put our big girl panties on, or men, whatever y'all wear too. You got to show up, stay at the table, and work through the difficult conversations. And if we do that, we can get to some solutions that can move our community forward for everybody.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to come down and visit with us, and
Thank you.
and being able to speak and share with us.
Thank you.
Definitely appreciate it. Thank you.
And I gotta say thank you all for your work. I know you don't hear it enough. You're underpaid, overworked, nobody recognizes what you do, but the people you serve recognize what you do. I certainly do, and I just want to give you all a heartfelt thank you and just stay in the game. So.
Thank you, Ben. I hope to see you again in the future. Awesome. Dale is going to give us a COC update and how things are shaken up with the Continuum of Care Board. Dale, thanks for taking the time to come down and be with us this morning.
Good morning, everybody. Well, the COC board is a 26-member board within the community that's been around for probably about 15 years. It's gone through a couple different stages. And I'm just giving this backdrop a little bit just because some people are new to the understanding of what we do. And we oversee a budget about $4.3 million from HUD that comes into the community that sponsors some of the projects for some of the bigger buildings downtown for transitional housing. And so that's what we do. And we are right now in our annual renewal process, beginning of the last quarter, which means that we're going to have an RFP coming out for maybe potential new projects. And then we have to rewrite and renew the application, the community application, which is the end of September. We also have the charge for our HUD funding to actually provide or administer or help administer with the city's help, who is our collaborative applicant, that we actually do the point-in-time count. And so I know that that was going to be a presentation. It's been hinted at, but yet we're looking at July now, I think, here. But, the numbers are out that, like 823 unsheltered single individuals. There's 82% of all the individuals counted are 25 and older. And one of our biggest roles with the board is keeping sort of the community sort of planning together and keeping sights on what is happening in the community. So more like right now, I've just heard this morning from a provider that there's hardly any youth seeking shelter right now. And so, just if you have any ideas, we would love to hear. Historically, we've seen this in the community like 8-9 years ago. We saw that, and what had happened is that there was actually somebody had opened up a house, like a flop house, and that's where all the youth were going. And so I'm throwing that out there because something's happening for that system to be not seeking, or youth seeking shelter. And so, just keeping the eye on the streets and seeing what we can do to, evolve with homelessness.
Thank you so much, Dale, for the time and any closing comments.
No closing comments.
All right.
Easy.
Well, thank you
Thanks,
very
Rob.
much. And I think you'll be surprised about what's point-in-time count presentation later in 20 minutes. Chelsea from the Spokane Regional Health District is going to give us an update on COVID, and Chelsea is this first time up here, isn't it? Yes, first time. You probably remember Kira and Kylie. Well, this is Chelsea from the Spokane Regional Health District. So, what's going on out in the world? Tech, you can borrow my mic.
Classic, first time up here and the mic doesn't work. Hi everyone. So a little bit of a COVID update from the health district. As of last week, we had a total of 791 cases come through. Compared to the week prior, we had 419, so that's about a 52% increase. Currently, right now, we are seeing those trends upward as well with shelter outbreaks. We have 6 shelters that are currently in outbreak status that we are helping manage. Also, we are seeing the trends on the west side of the state, we usually replicate those trends about 2 weeks after. So we've seen a huge, not a huge, but a moderate increase on the west side at the beginning of May, and then we saw our increase come through around like the 20th of May. So something to just keep in mind. When shelters are in outbreak, we do help them with guidance. If anybody has any questions on guidance or anything like that, you can reach out to me. We do still have the Salvation Army Isolation Facility and the Family Promise Isolation Facility as well for COVID positive individuals who are experiencing homelessness. I do manage the referrals for those, and Barry will send my contact info in the follow-up email after this. We do currently have the isolation facility for single adults. The current contract end date is till June 31st, but we are advocating with the county to have that extended until the end of September because we are seeing those trends and higher trends of utilization among the population. We want to be able to have that resource available for people to isolate safely and be able to then connect back to their shelter home base or connect with whatever providers they may need after their isolation. We also have a lot of over-the-counter tests available, and we are distributing those to shelters as well and doing COVID testing in shelters and out at Camp Hope. So we're doing everything we can to try to help out the community and those experiencing homelessness. And I believe that is all that I have.
And how do people get the over-the-counter test? Do they just reach out to you, or how do they get some of that?
So Kira, our public health nurse, she manages the testing side for all of our congregate settings, which include shelters. So if any providers have any questions on that, I can also include her contact info with mine that Barry will send out in the email as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time in joining us. And yeah, thank you. All right, now we have, let's see, who we have up now. We have Joe Ader of Family Promise. I know I told him he was going to go last, but surprise. Joe, welcome back to the coalition.
Thanks. It's like coming home.
Yeah.
It's like coming home. I love the coalition. So are we sitting? We can sit. Okay. Really excited to be here, be back with you guys. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joe Ader. I'm the Executive Director of Family Promise of Spokane. We work to end family homelessness here in Spokane County. And I'm actually here to bring good news today. So who wants to hear some good news finally on homeless? Yeah. We have some really important news and big news, and so I've got a presentation. We'll see if we can get the slides working for this, but we are actually 2 days away from being 6 months at functional zero on the family homelessness front. So,
And Joe, can you explain what functional zero means?
yes, functional zero is a very fancy term that basically just means the amount of people entering homelessness is equal to or less than the amount of people leaving homelessness. And so for this family population, that is where we are at. That's where we've been since December 4th, and so we're 2 days away from 6 months. 6 months is the time period that you have to go before it'll officially be considered functional zero with it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we did that, because the mayor mentioned this last time she was here, and I've gotten a lot of people come up and ask me questions on how this is happening. And so I got a little slideshow, so we're just going to walk through this, and I want to chat about what we've done and then have a chance for answering questions.
Definitely.
That's good. So go ahead and click that next slide. So this is how to end homelessness in 3 incredibly difficult steps, okay? So the first one is this. The first step, which is the next slide, is we all have to be humble. All of us need help. That's every single one of us as individuals, but also all of us as organizations. And we all have We all have needs that we need to work on. What we tend to do is put our strengths against others' weaknesses. And we tend to put our organization's strengths against others' weaknesses rather than looking at areas where we can work together. And for us to be where we are at on the family side, coming out of COVID during this time period when homelessness is raging, is really incredible, and it really has a lot to do with everybody working together, at least on the family side. And so I want to do a shout out to a couple of different organizations that some of you may not even know are very influential into what's happening right now. So one of those is the two mediation services, so Fulcrum and Northwest Mediation. Is there anybody here from Fulcrum or Northwest Mediation? So what you may not know is last year the state passed a law that required any landlord that's filing for eviction, so that's called an unlawful detainer, any landlord that files for that, they have to go through mediation with their tenant before the court will hear those cases. Since January, so between January and the end of April, Fulcrum and Northwest Mediation heard 2,995 cases, and they mediated successfully all but 114. So if those weren't in place right now, we would have 3,000, 4,000 more homeless on the street. So want to shout out to them for the work that they've done. Yeah, let's hear it for them. Awesome job mediating cases. And then all of the different organizations that come together, so Family Promise, Catholic Charities, opening up Gonzaga Haven has been a huge benefit. St. Margaret Shelter from Catholic Charities, Women's and Children's from UGM, Stepping Stones from Salvation Army, all of us working together, and then the Spokane Housing Authority putting in resources with vouchers to help families. And so I want to start out just humbly saying all of us have to work together. I want to share next kind of what our part has been in that, Family Promises, and so that's the next step here is this, after being humble, is take responsibility for a population. None of us can own all of homelessness, but we need to take responsibility for our part. And so for Family Promise, for us, what that means is if a family with a child becomes homeless anywhere in Spokane County, we consider that our responsibility. To try to help in whatever way we can, try to resolve that, or try to prevent that from happening. And so I think a lot of times we have a tendency to like point the finger and, well, you guys should do something about this. I think we all just need to take responsibility for our part and then do whatever we can to work together to do that. Go ahead and hit the next slide there. So when most people think of homelessness, if I said, picture homelessness in your mind, the majority of people would not have this picture in their mind. They would picture a single man under a bridge with a sign, maybe a beard, maybe a lot of stuff with him, but they typically don't picture kids and kids experiencing homelessness. So all these kids have been in our shelter in the past year. Go ahead and click to the next one. 1 in 25 students in Spokane County in the last full school year, which was 2019, were homeless. 1 in 25, so that's 3,108 kindergarten through 12th grade students in Spokane County. When you add their little brothers and sisters to the mix, and their parents, we are probably somewhere around 12,000 people in family units every year that experience homelessness in Spokane County. And this is increasing. It's not decreasing. It's actually increasing. So this is the population that we focus on at Family Promise. Go ahead and kick to the next one. So our mission is to equip families and communities to end the cycle of homelessness. Go ahead and next one. So here's the third step. Know the formula and invest in things to improve outcomes. So the formula I am talking about here is the formula to end homelessness. If this is really what we're here for, then we have to understand the formula to end homelessness. And This is going to sound really dumb, but this is the formula. Go ahead and hit the next slide. The amount of people entering homelessness has to be less than the amount of people leaving if we are going to end homelessness. Now that sounds self-explanatory, but we often don't focus on this formula when we are focusing on homelessness. We focus on bed nights. We focus on how many people are on the street right now, but we're often not focusing on how many are coming in and how many are exiting. And if we are ever going to end homelessness, this formula has to work out correctly, or we'll never get there. And so we've been taking this on, Family Promise, for the past couple of years and expanding our programming and really trying to make a dent in the number of people that are entering and the number of people that are leaving. And so I want to show you guys kind of how we're doing that. So we actually work in 3 different areas, those big circles there. One is prevention, the second one is providing shelter, and the third one is preparing stable housing. Most people know us from 2 areas, and they both revolve around shelter. Most people know Family Promise from our rotational shelter program, which we ran for 23 years, which was housing homeless families in local churches. And that program ran successfully until COVID shut it down in 2020. We looked to reopen that in 2023. Or they know us from the emergency shelter, which opened in December of 2016, which is 2 of the programs that we run. But we actually run a lot more than that. In the past several years, we've expanded the prevention side, so rental assistance and diversion. And last year served 3,512 people through rental assistance, trying to prevent families from becoming homeless in the first place. So if we could prevent that with some rental assistance, that was what we wanted to do. And then, like I said, we had to shut down the emergency or the rotational shelter in 2020. And we didn't want to reduce capacity to do that. So we opened up this neighborhood shelter site. We closed our administrative offices and turned it into another shelter. This is in the South Perry district. How many of you guys have visited the Haystack Heights? So our neighborhood site is the brown house that's right next door to Haystack Heights. We opened that as a shelter in 2020, and then we saw this really interesting thing happen. We saw the people that were staying at that smaller site location were exiting to permanent housing at 95%. To put that into context, the average emergency shelter in Spokane exits at 14%. When you average everybody together, our emergency family shelters exiting at 57%, but then we get to 95% at this smaller site. So it got us thinking, why? And is there a way to duplicate this? So in the past year and a half, we've opened up 4 more smaller site locations. And we're seeing similar results at all of them, these really high outcomes. So that has caused us to start to think about more how we expand. And so our model is actually moving. We will do 1 more expansion on the emergency shelter, which will open next month. Another 25 beds on the mass shelter. But moving forward, all of our expansions are going to be these smaller neighborhood sites in throughout the county. So we're in discussions with communities all throughout the county for these smaller site locations, trying to keep kids in the same communities where they're going to school, where they could have community resources. So this model has been working. Since December 4th, we have not turned anybody away from emergency shelter. We've had some days where we've gone over capacity, and then other days where that works out. And then we've done a ton on our case management side. And I've got 2 of our folks here, Chris and Serena, who oversee our programming. They do an amazing job. In the case management that they've been doing has been just extraordinary. We've seen increases every month in getting people into housing. Last month, between May 1st and May 10th, 26 people exited to permanent housing in just 10 days. To put that into perspective, in 2015, it took us all year to do 35. Last month, we did 26 in 10 days. So there's huge things happening on that front. The last area there, and this is the area that gets missed the most, is preparing families for stable housing. Our people get into housing and we tend to just leave them there. Housing is the third rung on the stabilization ladder: food, clothing, housing. There's another about 14 rungs before you get to stability, which include things like mental health and jobs, in stable jobs, in education. All of those things need to be in place before we actually hit thriving, rather than just surviving. And so really over the next year, our push is going to be a lot more into this stabilization side, ensuring stabilization. But even with that, we've been doing a lot of emergency type of work, and Susan from our team is over here that does that. But we have not had a family that's exited to permanent return to homelessness in the past 2 years from a Family Promise program. So good job, Susan, with that. Go ahead and click to the next slide. This is just shows you how the programs that we've been running at Family Promise have expanded over the past several years. So we went from serving 32 people in 2015 to just over 4,000 in 2021. And the shelter has expanded significantly. We've been able to do that primarily by the smaller sites and increasing the amount of people that are exiting. So we haven't grown our sites, the number of beds that much. We've increased the amount of times that people turn. So the number of people that are leaving in a permanent house. So there's two ways to build capacity. Either you build bigger shelters or you increase the amount of people that are leaving so you have more space for new people that are coming in at a faster rate. And so that's really what we've seen on that side. And then we've been doing a ton of rental assistance helped by the COVID funding, has really influenced that significantly. Go ahead and click to the next slide. One of the things that most people don't realize is the largest single age group that we serve is under 1 year old. So that's what this slide is showing you. If you look at that first bar, that's babies. That's newborns. So over the past 3 years, just under 100 newborns in our program. So most people, when they're thinking of homelessness, they're definitely not thinking of newborn babies. Because of this, though, it has caused us to open up a site just for families with newborns. And so there is actually an emergency shelter for newborns. We call it the Family Infant House. It's on the corner of Mission in Lidgerwood. It's a beautiful old greenhouse on the corner there that used to house the Dominican Sisters and now houses homeless newborns. In the past year, 32 babies have been born into homelessness through that shelter, through our shelters into that program. So, go ahead and click to the next one there. This is images of our shelter sites in our rental assistance office. You'll notice none of them really look like the traditional thought of a shelter. Most of the houses blend right into the neighborhoods. The neighbors don't even know that they're there for the most part. In the past 2 years, we've received complaints from one neighbor in 2 years. And that's at the emergency shelter, and that's the neighbor that bought the house on our back parking lot after we were already there. So they moved in after us. So that's that. That little mobile home one is an interesting one. It's a pilot in Cheney, where we're actually purchasing mobile homes in a mobile home park there and converting those into shelter sites in Cheney, which is our first expansion outside of the city. Go ahead and click to the next slide there. So here's that formula for us, that formula that we talked about. So between December of last year and June of this year, We've had 365 people enter shelter through Family Promise and 372 leave. So that's a net gain of 7. We're not talking huge numbers here, but we're talking a little bit more than has come in, has left. But we're teetering right on that equilibrium point right now. So it's still going to take a lot of work to really feel comfortable with the margins. And we are approaching July, which on the family side, July is the heaviest homeless month. Not December, but July for families. So right after school lets out is when we see the biggest push. And so really over the next month, we'll really tell how stable we can be. Go ahead and click to the next slide. These are some of the families that have come through in the past year, and I'm a nerd, so I look at numbers a lot, and I talk about formulas, and I talk about statistics, but really every single one of those numbers is a person. It's a person in our community that we can serve and can care about, and that needs a little bit of help, and often they don't need that much. Some need a lot, and some just need somebody to be there for them. And so I thank you, all of you that are here, that are in this work with us. I'm grateful for my team, for those that are here. I just want to give an applause for my team, for the work that they do. And just grateful to be here.
Joe, that's awesome. I mean, first of all, great work to you and your team are doing such great things in the community. A few questions would be, going back to the formula, those exiting, are those people exiting into housing?
Those are exiting into housing. Yeah, they're either exiting into housing or exiting into one of our partners. So St. Margaret's is doing a fantastic job at getting people into housing as well. I think they are averaging 68 to 70% of the people that stay at St. Margaret's are exiting into permanent housing. And so it's either one of those two outcomes and then exiting onto permanent housing, either from transitional housing or directly out of shelter into permanent housing of their own.
And what do you think are some potential, I guess, commonalities between, I know families, you mentioned taking responsibility, you and your team and Family Promise for that population group. Is there any commonality you think with single adults when you go into that realm, as far as finding that measurable component for those exiting homelessness?
I think absolutely, right? So the formula is the same no matter what population we're working with. That formula still has to work. It doesn't matter where we go with it. There are some things with families that make families easier, and there are some things with families that make them harder. So with families, you have that unit together, and there's a motivation of a child. So even if the parents don't want to do it for themselves, they typically have a motivation to want to see something better for their kids. So we do have that motivation aspect. So that makes it easier. It's harder in that if we have got to turn somebody away, we're turning away a baby or a child. And it's harder in that trauma in families is compounded by 3 or 4 rather than just one individual. So we get 3 or 4 compounded traumas working together at the same time in the same family unit. And all of our kids and parents are dealing with trauma. So homelessness is one of those adverse childhood experiences. So all of them have at least one ACE, but usually they are 6 to 8 on the scale of 10 by the time they show up at an emergency shelter. So yeah, I think there's several different points where we can find commonalities in this. One of those things is we got to get much better at measuring and being good at measuring. Having an idea of really how many people are coming in, how many people are turning away from the shelters, how many are being housed, how many are on the streets, and then how many are exiting. I think we have a lot of work to do on the data side to even get to where we can make this assessment as a community. but we can get there. It's going to take all of us being okay with putting it out there.
And that's the responsibility piece that you touched on, as far as taking responsibility. When you say we need to get better at measuring, that's like, okay, each organization has their own, subgroup that they work with.
I think so. I think we all need to put all of our data together and have it as a community-wide database. We need to see actually what's happening everywhere across the community. It shouldn't be, Sherry emailing every night and trying to get the stats on where our numbers are. It should be a community-wide thing that we just all see, good or bad, own it as a community, and then say, okay, we're going to move the needle, and then actually have a way to measure if we're moving the needle or not, as a community as a whole.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Any closing comments before we bring up the guy who's going to talk about measure the point in time count?
Awesome. Awesome. I just want to say I'm grateful for everybody here. I was grateful to lead the Homeless Coalition before you guys had to deal with COVID on top of it.
You didn't mention that, Joe.
But I'm grateful to be part of this community, and I know that Family Promise is grateful to be here with all of you in this work together. There's a lot of work for us all to do, but it can be done. I think that's the biggest thing to leave everybody with. It can be done. For the first time, we are at functional zero on the family side, which has never been done before. I don't know how long we'll hold it right now, but at least we can say it's possible, and we have an example of it being possible, at least for a time period. And so we know that it can be achieved again, and can be achieved for our whole community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. All right, Mr. Ramos. One microphone. Perfect. Daniel, welcome.
Hi, Robert.
Talking about numbers. I'll hand you the mic here.
How about? Yeah. Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Barry, for the invitation. Thank you, Robert, for the introduction. My name is Daniel Ramos. I'm with the city of Spokane. Myself and my team, we operate the Community Management Information System, which closely follows, as prescribed, the Homeless Management Information System standard. A lot of words there. So when Joe talks about, I appreciate everything Joe put up in data. We actually just met 2 weeks ago on a lot of that. Joe is one of 128 projects that enter into the Community Management Information System. What I'm talking about today, though, is the point-in-time count. About 70% of the data that we bring into the point-in-time count, which you're seeing being brought up here, comes from that Community Management Information System. So let me start with what is the point-in-time count. The point-in-time count is a federally mandated count of folks who are experiencing homelessness on one night at the end of January. This year, we asked HUD for an exemption, and they encouraged it because of a little public health crisis we were having called COVID. Because of that, we bumped that to February 24th. So that was the night of the count. Starting February 25th, we do an unsheltered count for 6 days after that ended on March 1st. So we counted all the folks staying in emergency shelters and transitional housing on February 24th, and the unsheltered group, we asked where did they stay on the night of the 24th, and that's where you get that point-in-time count. I was thinking about the intro as I came up here, and I just want to say, I think today with this group, I'm going to show you some numbers, but nothing here is going to surprise you. I think if anything, it's going to validate what you're seeing. What my hope is that this data gets used for planners, for the COC board, for projects like Joe's and others who are helping and doing this work, the healthcare system, the education system, the criminal justice system. This is one signal in a range of data that our community has, letting us know what who these folks are. So I want to thank too Eastern Washington University, Spokane Public Libraries, the City of Spokane Valley, and Spokane County, and of course all the volunteers and groups that helped to put this together. So with that, I know I'm on a time crunch, so I'm going to go right into the data. Shiloh, if you don't mind getting down to those slides. And I guess I'll sit. Everyone else kind of sit. I'm getting older too, so these chairs are nice. So the point in time count, as you can see, those top line counts, the 1757 number, that is the total persons counted on the night of the pit. And then you can see that that's broken down by those who were unsheltered and those that were in a shelter or transitional housing project. So those who are unsheltered, many of you know, if you, raise your hand if you enter into CMIS, by the way, I should have asked that. Okay, quite a few of you. So that's the HUD definition, living in a place not meant for human habitation. Shelter, transitional housing projects. A shelter is an emergency shelter, usually 90 days. Transitional housing is usually upwards of 2 years, typically max for individuals, families, depending on the project. Who are these folks? Well, I looked at the demographic data, which I don't have a slide on. I didn't want to have you have cognitive overload. You're 10% less likely to be white during the point in time count, and 74% of the folks identified as white. The rest were considered themselves black, indigenous, or a person of color. So to break that down for you. Dale gave some percentages that came out in our press release. Dale, thank you for that. Yes, most were older than 25. And I guess what I want to leave you with this number here is that you're most likely to be, there is a disproportionality with our general population, and you're more likely to be a person of color if you were counted in the pit. Next slide, please, Shiloh. We pull out vulnerabilities during the point in time count, so we ask what are their barriers, and you can see they're broken up there. Here, the main point for this slide, as you look at those numbers, is that vulnerabilities are more pronounced in the homeless population. This is where I get back to what I was telling you. This is nothing that you don't already know. And the point in time count looks at the entire population, which is those big bars there, and you can see 31% identified as being severely mentally ill, and that it impaired them to have housing. The smaller box is a drill down of those who are unsheltered. Similar percentages, slightly lower for the severely mentally ill, but again, what this slide tells us, the meaning of this slide, is that these vulnerabilities are more pronounced. Homelessness seems to accentuate vulnerabilities. This question gets asked every year, which is, where are they coming from? I've done the point in time count for the last 7 years. We've done this survey question on and off. What I can tell you is, year after year, the majority of folks that are experiencing homelessness are from our region, if not from our city. They're people in our community. What about that? Well, I want to thank Matt Anderson, PhD, Director of Urban and Regional Planning at EWU. He said, let's take this question and let's go a little bit deeper and look at neighborhoods. I don't have that data here for you today, but we will be showing you that later in a future presentation. But what we've done is we're able to look. We asked, let me share what the question was, is we asked folks, in what neighborhood did you become homeless? So what you see on this slide is we aggregated that information, and we can get down to that level, and we will, again, I will show that at a later presentation. But of those that responded, 74% of the unsheltered, so this is just folks in the unsheltered, 74% said they were from Spokane County. And then those gumdrops down below is the breakout of that subpopulation or that subgroup, where did they say they were at? And 79% said that they were in the city of Spokane, Spokane County, and 8% in Spokane County, and then 13% in city of Spokane Valley. So what's important about this slide? One, we sort of answer that question on the night of the count. Where were the unsheltered folks? Said, what community were they from? Primarily here. The other one is that sleeping location. This goes back to what Joe was talking about, is sort of that invisibility of folks who are on the streets. And you can see there that, yes, there are those in outdoor encampments, but we have quite a few who are sleeping in RVs, in cars, in other places where you might not see them. And I think most citizens, when they engage with folks who are experiencing homelessness, it's the person they see downtown, right? But we can see from the point in time count that they're scattered in all kinds of locations. Also, we asked, how long have you been in Spokane? And I will tell you, there are constraints with any survey, and this one in particular has its own challenges. We train volunteers. I want to thank Megan Vincello. She did a great job as the operator during the point in time count, conducting that over the 5 days, and she trained the majority of volunteers, and we were really consistent on how we ought to be asking these questions. So I have great confidence in that. That said, I did some surveys, and when you ask folks, where are you from, or how long have you been here, they start counting. They go, there were breaks in between. So it's almost a conversation to get that. So nothing's perfect, but you can see here, the majority of them have been here for at least 10 years. Next slide there. Okay, so let me thread this needle for you. Part of the reason why the point in time count has taken a while to get together and all the data to put together is because we didn't want to just give you a flat file of X and Y axes on here's the demographics and here's the count. We really wanted to bring in researchers to do the analysis piece and look at the drivers for homelessness here in Spokane. And that's where Dr. Shiloh Dietz and Dr. Matt Anderson came in, and they started taking the point in time count data and looking at that in the context of other factors. And so what this chart shows you here, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Dietz now, and she'll walk you through this slide.
So yeah, as Daniel said, we've been looking at other factors, and a data point that we don't have here is a question we asked about why people became homeless, and the top answer there was lack of affordable housing. So we were thinking, like, why is this? What data can we bring in to show? We have intuitive thoughts about Spokane, how it's grown, how it's changed, but how does that track with our PIT? So this chart right here, in purple is the change in the PIT count over time for both unsheltered and sheltered. And the green line is Housing Affordability Index for Spokane, which is a combination, and Dr. Matt Anderson will get into it briefly in a moment, but it's a combination of income and housing cost. So a Housing Affordability Index of 100 means there's a balance, that there is affordability. And most of these values, I know it's small, but if you can see, are above 100, meaning Spokane was very affordable, up into like 200, 218 even. And in recent years, I think since maybe 2019, it's dipped below 100. So we went from being a highly affordable city to an unaffordable city, and we see a very, statistics don't often work out this cleanly, but we see, and it's, of course, this correlation isn't necessarily a direct causation, but we see a very direct, sort of clear visual relationship between our fluctuation in the point in time count and the fluctuation in the housing affordability. And then I'm gonna pass it to Matt, and Matt, maybe you can go up front, and we'll take questions up there.
Please, Matt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I guess just to talk a little bit about right, what you're looking at, this slide here, as well as the previous one. The previous one speaks volumes as far as why this is really happening, why we've seen this increase. You saw the number of the unsheltered increase to 823, significant increase over the past 5-6 years or so. And what we've seen since 2016 is the median sales price in Spokane's doubled between 2016 and 2021, from 172,000 to 335,000, I think. And just in the last year, it's well over 400,000 now. Wages have not increased by that much. So it's the gap. And this is what we know. Poverty is the main structural determinant here. And then you add on each of these other vulnerabilities. All it takes is one or two of those things to, and if you don't have a family support network who can take you in when any of these sort of unexpected expenses or contingencies happen, then just like that, you're out on the street. And so what we've seen is essentially the wider the gap between housing costs and wages, the greater the likelihood, the increased number of people then automatically become vulnerable before any of those other vulnerabilities kick in. That's the big explanation, I guess. I could keep talking for a long time, but I'm going to stop. Yeah.
And if I will, I'll sort of bookend this with, I think we have one more slide there, maybe not. So, yeah, so we'll leave it open for questions. What I want to say is that one of the unique contributions of Shiloh and Matt is we're going to be hosting on July 13th at the New Central Library our story map. So you got a bit of a teaser of kind of how that looks. What Matt's team and the work of Shiloh's team have done is really taken that geospatial data, so the mapping data, the geography, and overlaid that with this data so you can really get the sense of what's happening in the community with those numbers. So that's going to be at the Central Library. And with that, so please come to that. Please join that. We'll get Barry the time for that on the 13th. The other piece I want to leave you with before questions is we're going to send out a survey after this. We have a little bit more time for analysis, so we'll send you the presentation, one that's a little more robust, and you let us know what kind of insights you're looking for, and if we can address it in the July 13th presentation, we will. If we can't, we'll take note of it for next year's point-in-time count. With that, Robert, I'll hand it over.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any questions? And if you have questions, just yell them out. I'll repeat them so the YouTube watchers can hear it as well. Any questions?
So Daniel, I can send this presentation out on the listserv?
This particular one, no, it's warehoused in the city's site, but I will get you something, yes.
Question. Back there, Jess. Want to repeat that question as far as what she asked, summarize?
So she was asking, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the increase in housing prices consistent with the state and nation? And what we're actually seeing is that compared to like Washington, Seattle, and the US, Spokane, the cost of living used to be lower than all of those. Wages were also lower, but it was livable. And what's happened is the cost of living has gone up and wages have stayed lower than those comparables, than Washington State and US averages. So maybe we'll catch up, but for the time being, that increase in cost of living and wages has not tracked with other averages.
Thank you. Any other questions right here up front? Yes, can you repeat the question? Yes, and so the question was, in summary, just have who's buying all the houses, basically, or being able to afford the housing market right now.
I'll let Matt answer that, but sort of just a footnote to that. Why does it matter, the housing stuff? Like, how does it connect to the homeless population, those experiencing homelessness, you're probably asking. And Shiloh, I think, put it best. It's a trickle-down effect. Those that used to be able to afford this housing band now has to purchase it in this lower-cost housing band, and then the lower income folks now no longer have a connection point to purchasing homes. And so when you're trying to use rental assistance dollars to get folks out of homelessness into housing, those properties, that stock is just less available. So I wanted to make that connection for you. With that, Matt, please.
Yeah, who's buying all of this? It's a good question. It's unclear, but what we know, there's a lot of people who have discovered Spokane, right? This is a nice place to be. Look how affordable it is if you're living in Los Angeles, where 900 square foot bungalows over $1 million, right? So I think you have a lot of people who are retiring perhaps, or looking to move somewhere else that's more affordable, and you sell your house for $1 million, and look what you can get in Spokane, a much bigger house and property, and save maybe $500,000. So that's a big selling point. So we think we're seeing a lot of people moving from out of state, California, Texas. Realtors will tell you that they are actively searching for out-of-state, clientele people to consider Spokane, and I think that's driving a lot of it. And the other side of this is we haven't kept up with the production of housing, and what new housing has been built, it's pretty much all priced at the top, and that doesn't help, right? It's got to be priced at the bottom. So I think we looked at, what's affordable to someone making minimum wage. I think as long as it's under 30% of your income, right, it's considered affordable. You're not rent burdened. And we looked, my students and I, we looked Zillow, Realtor.com, looking just, I think, on various days in March and April, how many units are out there that someone who's making minimum wage can actually afford without being rent burdened. And I think you'd have to be, if you're making minimum wage, you'd have to find somewhere $867 or less. How many units did we find? 0. Right, and that's the problem. The inflation of housing is just exacerbated. The number of people who.
Just to add really quick, we're potentially also seeing an increase, I think this is across the nation, but of investors buying property as purely like you could invest in the stock market or you could invest in property. So I think that is potentially, we have data that we haven't fully analyzed on this, but that is also a factor.
Well, thank you guys so much. We are a little bit over, but thank you so much for your time and coming down and sharing with us all your information. So thank you again for being up here. And then lastly, we have Barry coming up to make his announcement as well.
Well, my announcement is, do any of you have announcements? Come on up. We got a couple of minutes. Come on up, take the microphone. If you have announcements or things you want to tell the coalition, going once. Oh, here we go. Hallie, come on up.
So I just wanted to real quick, I sent an email out, I think it was yesterday. I've been trying to figure out kind of what to do with my recent experience. Myself and our operations manager, Kel, had the opportunity to travel down to San Diego, and we went on foot from provider to provider, shelter to shelter, and spoke with people as well as with folks experiencing homelessness there, and went into the City Path program and really observed some really amazing things, and then some have some concerning observations and really want to figure out how to get together with folks and talk about what we learned there, because I think this is a critical time to really look at that, since San Diego is one of the models that Spokane is using as a basis for how we move forward. And so I just wanted to put that out there that I'd really love to enter into conversations with people and share that information out and see what we all can make of it. So thanks.
Thanks, Hallie. Anybody else? Going. Thank you for being here. Have a good rest